Probably know that if you want to become fluent in English, it is essential to have the habit of practicing your English every day. But with all the things we have to do in life, sometimes it can be difficult to remain consistent with studying something like English. While this is something that happens to all of us, there is one really simple way to develop consistency with your practice, even if you think that you don't have time to study English. So in today's video, I am going to introduce you to this idea of systems and give you some tips that are going to help you make your English practice so much more consistent so that you can finally reach all of your goals in English, even if your time is really limited. So let's go. So before I introduce you to this topic of systems, which is going to be immensely helpful, it's really important that first we discuss why it is just so difficult for us as human beings to maintain good habits. If you're anything like me, your life is surrounded by all sorts of different distractions. You can easily spend hours watching series on Netflix or watching videos on your favorite social media platform. Now, between doing something that takes more effort, like sitting down and cracking open your English grammar book, or doing something that's fun and easy, let's say watching a funny video on TikTok, our natural tendency always seems to be to go towards doing the thing that is easier or that is more comfortable, right? Now, not knowing why you started studying English in the first place makes it really difficult to practice consistently. That's why it's so important to have a clear goal. A clear goal can set you in the right direction. Without a clear goal, it's like you're trying to throw darts without a dartboard. But here's where things get interesting. It's not enough just to set goals. You also need systems. So goals are a one-time event, but systems are how you get there. It's a bit like the difference between a journey and a destination. So to give you a couple examples, if you want to lose weight, then the amount you want to lose is your goal. But your system is eating healthy and exercising, right? Or maybe something that's more relevant to you. If you wanted to get a band 9 on the IELTS exam, then that's your goal, but the system is actually sitting down and studying. So when you change your focus to systems, it helps you to actually enjoy the process instead of being too focused in on the result that you're hoping to achieve or the goal. For example, if you say, I want to be fluent in English, that's the end result that you want to have, or the goal. But now, ask yourself, what do I need to do to achieve this goal? Or in other words, how am I going to practice every day in order to become fluent? That's the system. In his best-selling book, Atomic Habits, behavior science expert James Clear explains that we need to spend less time obsessing over our goals and spend more time designing the systems that are going to help us on the way to achieve them. In other words, he tells us to focus more on how we're going to achieve our goals rather than on what we want to achieve. So one quote that I love from James says, "We think we need to change our results, but the results are not the problem. What we really need to change are the systems that cause those results." So this brings us to tip number 1. Forget about goals, focus on systems instead. Okay, so what this means for you as an English learner is that you need to stop focusing so much on learning English just so you can achieve something else like getting a better job or passing a test. Instead, shifting your focus to the reality that you're probably going to be spending your entire life really learning English. So you really should make it a fun, valuable, and meaningful part of your life. It's going to be an endless cycle of improvement and refinement. So you might as well enjoy the journey. Now, this isn't to say that goals can't be useful milestones along the way. However, what systems help us to really do is shift from just having a short-term focus into having a long-term focus. In other words, realizing that no one becomes fluent overnight or in 3 months or even in a year. If you're really wanting to master a language, it can take years upon years upon years. So what systems help us to do is to put the focus on the little things that we need to do every day in order to have immense long-term benefits. So just to give you an example, say that you make it your habit to learn 3 new words every day. That's not really that much, and it might just seem like it's too small of an objective to have. However, if you were able to do this successfully, if you can successfully build this goal of spending just a few minutes every day practicing and memorizing 3 new words, then over 2 years, you will have added over 2,000 new words to your vocabulary. So you can see it really builds up over time. And just imagine, if in 2 years you know 2,000 more words than you know today, you're going to understand almost all the words that you encounter when you're watching a series or reading a book, and you're also going to be able to speak English so much more eloquently than you can now. Now, I'm sure that you clicked on this video because you probably just don't have a lot of time to dedicate to learning English. And I totally feel you. I usually feel like I'm running from one thing to the next. That's why the next tip is just so important for busy people like you and me. But before we move on to that, I wanted to let you know that if you enjoy videos like this that not only help you to improve your English, but also to improve your life, well, we bring you a new one every single week. So make sure that you don't miss a single one, because we're gonna help you go from being a lost and insecure English learner to being a confident, successful English speaker. Hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so YouTube can let you know every time we publish the new one. And that brings us to tip number 2, develop micro habits. All right, so take a quick listen to this podcast clip where we explain exactly what micro habits are.
The micro habits come in, this idea of micro habits, to solve that, because what science says these days about habit building is that first you must standardize the habit before you want to optimize it. So people normally go big with habits. They think, read for an hour, or I'm going to try this diet, and it's already a very extreme diet. And they don't practice the actions that are more related to the starting point, to getting started.
All right, and the reason that this works is because of something called compounding effects. So what this means is that, for example, if you were to get 1% better every day at something, you would have grown 37 times over the 365 days in the year. And if on the other side of things, imagine you were to get 1% worse at something every single day, well, in a year, you'd be pretty close to 0 in that thing. And that's probably why we have the expression in English, if you don't use it, you lose it. So this is all to say that the small changes may seem insignificant in the day-to-day, but when you start to think long-term, they can make really tremendous impacts on your life. This is exactly how investors are able to get rich. Or if we think of a more practical example, we could go back to weight loss. So if you were to change nothing else other than eating just 100 calories, which is a tiny amount less each day, you would be able to lose 4.5 kilos in a year. So basically the advice here is to focus more on what are the small, easy, incremental changes that you can make in your everyday that will ultimately lead you to long-term success, instead of focusing on trying to make big changes that you'll probably just give up on after a few weeks. Now, studying or practicing your English really is not that hard. What is really hard is just pushing ourselves to sit down and do it. Our brains don't mind hard work. What they mind is just the idea of having to do something difficult. That's why most people will not be very successful if they try to sit down and study for 1 hour every single day. Instead, something that's much more effective is called the 5-minute rule. When you think about sitting down and having to study for an English exam or study English conjugations, it sounds pretty challenging. It doesn't sound very gratifying, does it? But when you think about having to just sit down and listen to a podcast in English for 5 minutes and maybe note down the new vocabulary here, that sounds a lot easier, doesn't it? The crazy thing is that for most of us, if we put on a podcast with the intention to just listen for 5 minutes, we'll probably listen for more than that. Getting started really is the biggest effort for us. But once we get started, then those 5 minutes might turn into 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes or more. Now, your objective here should not be tricking your brain into studying for an hour by telling it you're only going to study for 5 minutes. Rather, what the objective here is to build a healthy habit of studying consistently. If those 5 minutes turn into 15 or 30 minutes, that's awesome. But if they don't, then you should still feel good if you only do 5 minutes about checking off your English studying for the day. So I want to propose and challenge you to adding a new micro habit to your life. And that is having a conversation every single day for just 4 minutes. Now that might sound a little bit crazy. Who is going to want to speak with me for just 4 minutes? Well, on the Real Life English app, you can do exactly that. Anytime, anywhere, you can just press a button and have a fun and dynamic 4 to 8 minute conversation with another English speaker from another part of the world. And remember how earlier I discussed the micro habit of learning just a few new English words every single day? Well, a really great and fun way to do this is with the Real Life English podcast, which you can listen to on the app for free with a full transcript. And very soon, we are going to be adding vocabulary flashcards, which are going to help you to practice these words and never forget them. So what are you waiting for? Download the Real Life English app for free in your favorite app store right now, or simply click up here or down the description below to find it. And finally, tip number 3. Consistency is key. So hands down, the best way to be consistent when it comes to learning a language like English is to develop a bilingual lifestyle. Now, what do I mean by this? Remember earlier I said that you should not just learn English, but actually make it an important, meaningful part of your life? Now, there's so many different fun ways that you can do this, and a lot of them are really low impact. So it could be small things like changing your device's language to English. So that could mean your phone, your social media accounts, your computer, etc. And that way you'll learn little words by actually using these different things. I actually remember still in Portuguese the word bate-papo, which is a chat, because when I was learning Portuguese, I changed my Facebook's language to Portuguese. And there are lots of other things. I've talked about today developing a habit of listening to podcasts, be that podcasts for English learners or native podcasts that are just about topics that you're interested in. And the great thing about this is it's really a bilingual lifestyle. So it's something that you can do in other parts of your life. So you can listen to it, while you're in line at the supermarket, or while you're driving to work in the morning, or while you're running. And of course, if you're watching TV series, try to always watch them in English with or without English subtitles. Listen to your favorite songs and actually look up the lyrics. All of these can be great different ways to just have micro exposures with the language. And they're probably things that you're doing anyway, so it's a super easy change to make. And with all of these things, remember that 5 minutes a day is much better than 2 hours twice a week. So with all of these, you really are required to have a shift in your mentality. So thinking long term instead of thinking so much about your goals. You start to see that success really comes from doing little things every day rather than doing tremendous big efforts in a short amount of time. We all want to believe that there's some magic pill out there that we're going to take and suddenly it's going to help us to achieve our goal of being fluent or of being super in shape. But whatever our goal is, it always requires putting in the daily effort, be that going to the gym or for us studying vocabulary every day and creating a lifestyle that really supports that. I promise you that if you commit to the process, you will see progress. There's another really great quote from this book, Atomic Habits, and from James Clear that I love. And it says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." So today we've been talking all about building new habits, and I want to hear from you. After watching this, what new English habit do you want to do for your English practice? Share it down below, and also be sure to check out what other learners said. It might also just give you a great idea for something you can add to your own English lifestyle. So today we discussed why, contrary to popular belief, focusing too much on goals is counterproductive. Now, this is not to say that goals are not important. Goals are the first step. In fact, with all of my coaching students, I used to have them do on the very first day of class, think about why they're learning the language. And I would actually have them even write this down and put it somewhere they would see every single day, because this is an immense motivator. However, once we've done this, then it's really great to spend some time on designing, planning, and optimizing our systems. That's how you plan on achieving this goal. Now, if you do this, then learning English is just going to become an effortless habit for you, and you will naturally become a confident English speaker as a result of these good habits in learning. So in this episode, Kase and Izzy are discussing how to implement good habits in your life. For this first part, you will listen to 3 extracts, and you need to choose the best option, A, B, or C, to answer the questions. Are you ready? After listening to each section, we'll give you the option of playing it again if you feel it's necessary.
So this is how most of us live our lives, including me. And it's really important